hopefully you've had a chance to take a peek at these different words. They all connect to one topic we're going to look more closely about today, and that is tall tales. Now, all of these words are specific language to this discipline or the area of language arts. As readers, we learn a great deal about content-specific vocabulary in this area. And one of my favorites is jargon. Jargon are special words or expressions that are used by a particular profession or group. Sometimes they're difficult for others to understand. Teachers use lots of jargon, or words that we refer to when we're describing different reading strategies. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the jargon that connects to tall tales. Now here is a great text that I found online from Wonderopolis, and it's about tall tales. Someone asked the question, why do they call it a tall tale? And so all of these words are here in this text. Have you ever read a story that you knew was just pulling your leg? Chances are it might have been a tall tale. Tall tales are stories that are told as if they were true, but contain exaggerated or unbelievable parts. Some tales are exaggerations of real events, while others are completely make-believe. Tall tales are usually very funny because the exaggerations in the story tend to be the main focus of the whole story. A key part of American folk literature, tall tales are believed to have started from the bragging contests that tough American frontiersmen would start when they gathered around a fire. Most tall tales come from the 1800s, when courageous explorers had exciting adventures on their way to the Wild West. Popular tall tale characters from American folklore include Johnny Appleseed, Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, and John Henry. For example, Paul Bunyan is a legendary lumberjack of gigantic proportions. Along with his blue ox named Babe, Paul Bunyan is said to have created logging in the United States, created the Great Lakes to water Babe, cleared all of North and South Dakota for farming, and trained ants to do logging work. Of course, there's not a shred of truth to it, but it does make for a good story. Although no one knows for sure, many people believe these stories are called tall tales because they describe heroes that are larger than life. The heroes of tall tales are taller, bigger, and stronger than real people, even if the tall tale is based on a real person. For example, here's one story that describes Paul Bunyan's birth. It took 5 giant storks to deliver Paul to his parents. His first bed was in a lumber wagon pulled by a team of horses. As a newborn, Paul Bunyan could yell so loud he scared all the fish out of the rivers and streams. His parents had to milk 24 cows morning and night to keep his milk bottle full, and his mother had to feed him 10 barrels of porridge every 2 hours to keep his stomach from rumbling and knocking the house down. Could you imagine a baby like Paul Bunyan? Yikes! It's easy to see, though, why such exaggerated details in a story led to them being called tall tales. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for exaggerated. Now we have an opportunity to pair an informational text in this lesson. So we're going to read this nonfiction article called Mining Town Tales Jump-Started Mark Twain's Literary Career. In other words, how he got started being a writer. He was inspired by Mining Town Tales. Angels Camp, California. In a humble-looking notebook, a century and a half old, there's an important entry that's barely longer than a tweet. Coleman with his jumping frog. Bet stranger $50. Stranger had no frog, and Coleman got him one. In the meantime, Stranger filled Coleman's frog full of shot, and he couldn't jump. Stranger's frog won. Now I'm going to tell you from my background knowledge, shot means like bullets from their rifles. That passage was the literary skeleton of a wildly improbable story that introduced much of the 19th century world to Samuel Clemens, better known by his pen name, Mark Twain. Twain had journeyed west from Missouri with visions of making his fortune in the gold fields of California. If you don't have any schema about this, here's a topic to read more about that gold rush. After hearing fellow miner tales in Angel's Camp, he sketched out the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County and reversed his luck. Now I'm going to pause here for a minute. This is one of my favorite tall tales, and it's one that I have a video link for you to watch if you haven't had a chance yet. I want to go back up here to this idea of a literary skeleton, because when we think of the word skeleton, we think of something probably very different. In this case, a skeleton, we can think of it as the bones or as perhaps a framework. This particular note here was kind of that backbone or that starting point for his tall tale. So this tale is about a jumping frog where a bet took place and there was a little bit of a trick played. The stranger had fed the frog so that he couldn't jump, and so the stranger's frog won. Now back here. Twain spent just 88 days in the Mineral Ridge Mountains to the east of San Francisco. Yet that rainy winter of 1864 and 65 is seen as a major turning point in his life and in his career. Though unsuccessful at mining, he developed friendships that helped shape his decision to abandon youthful dreams of a paddle boating career on the mighty Mississippi. Instead, Twain decided he would excite the laughter of God's creatures. So it was this time in his life that got him started being a writer. Now here's the next section in the article. It says, California days were a turning point. Robert H. Hurst, curator of the Mark Twain Project and papers at the University of California in Berkeley, says that Twain's season in California brought him to a key fork in the road. Now, I'm sure we're not talking about a literal fork. Even when he's in Angel's Camp, he has not made up his mind to make his career in literature, and he's not going to make that leap until he is forced to economically. Only when he had run out of money and other career options did Twain fully embrace his literary talent. In other words, he didn't turn to writing as a way to make money until he had to. Twain's friend Artemus Ward was an established humorist who had become something of a mentor to Twain. Ward asked Twain to write a short story to include in Ward's new book of Western experiences, so Twain resurrected the frog tale he'd heard in Angel's Camp. He didn't finish the story in time to make it into Ward's book, but Ward's publisher liked it and sent it on to the Saturday Press. The frog tale turned out to be a huge hit. Twain had finally struck gold. Not actual gold, but a way to make money. I don't think he would have reached that conclusion quite the way he did if it hadn't been for this moment in mining country, away from all the pressure, said Hirsch. He's not having to worry about earning a living. He's messing around with pocket mining, and he listens. One of the key things about that notebook is that anecdotes he writes down in it appear in his work forever. Now, I noticed in this section that there are several words that are specific to this area of study. We have curator, mentor, resurrected, and anecdotes. I'd like you to pause the video and take a moment to write all of these words down because they're worth looking up and adding to our vocabulary. A new brand of American humor. Over the next 45 years, Twain classics such as The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn were rooted in a new and distinctly American approach to humor. It's not something Twain discussed as much in his own writing, though he did write one piece titled How to Tell a Story in 1899. The work highlighted the difference between the new American brand of humor and that of its European counterparts. There are several kinds of stories, but only one difficult kind, the humorous, Twain wrote. The humorous story is American. The comic story is English. The witty story is French. The humorous story depends for its effect upon the manner of the telling. The comic story and the witty story upon the matter. It's an interesting quote here that I want to reflect on later. Twain's influences can be traced back to his circle of friends in the mining camps of Northern California. During his mining days, the author stayed in a ramshackle cabin owned by Jim Gillis, a friend's older brother. Jim Gillis was well educated and articulate. He was also quite funny. According to Twain's journal, Gillis was known for entertaining groups of friends with the tales he fabricated on the spot. He could also recite Byron, Shakespeare, Bacon, Dickens, and every kind of only first-class literature from memory. Another entry says he and Gillis, who remained friends for life, goofed around during dinner one night, talking like people 80 years old and toothless. There's an interesting piece of text for us to discuss as well. Okay, so we can definitely add the words articulate and fabricated. On your copy of the text, let's examine this section and this section, and then this down here. I think they'll make great things for us to discuss. Here's the next section of the article. Twain learned speaking style from lifelong friend. Twain marveled at Gillis's deadpan delivery. Twain borrowed Gillis's seemingly serious style and made it all his own when he took to the stage in 1866. Angel's Camp, the mining town where Twain first encountered the frog jumping story, continues to celebrate the Californian chapter of Twain's life with its annual Calaveras County Fair and Jumping Frog Jubilee. For 4 days each year, the town's resident population of 3,836 expands more than tenfold to reach an average attendance of 50,000. This year's attendance was expected to surge. This year marks the 150th anniversary of Twain's short story being published in the New York Saturday Press. Guests can see the town's Hop of Fame, bronze plaques set into 3 blocks of the Main Street sidewalk with names of prize-winning frogs all the way back to the 1920s. People can explore gold mining in any number of places. They come here because of Mark Twain, said Jim Fletcher, a retired middle school English and history teacher. All right, we got a couple more interesting words here. Deadpan and Jubilee. Let's wrap up the article. Here's the last section. Storyteller keeps Twain's legacy alive. Fletcher has taken on the title of Official Storyteller of Calaveras County. He entertains and educates audience about Twain's life every Wednesday in the warmly decorated Mark Twain Library at Camp's Restaurant, a short drive from downtown Angel's Camp. He calls his weekly talk 88 Days in the Mother Lode. He's using the same title for a short book he'll publish next month and a low-budget documentary about Twain he made with filmmaker John C. Brown. Brown noted that Twain's experience at Angel's Camp has sometimes been minimized in the past, but that's changing. There's now a wonderful energy about Twain and his importance to our town, Fletcher said. The 150 celebration will change everything in our town for the better and hopefully supply a much richer and educationally rewarding visit to our community. So what was this article mostly about? About how mining tails life, or living in these mining camps and listening to these tales, played a big role in influencing Mark Twain as a writer. We've got plenty of parts in this text to be able to discuss with our group. Before you do that, I want you to take a look at one more piece of text that I have for you. This is Twain's original story, written in his own words. Now, the language is pretty full of very specific and challenging words. So there's definitely going to be a lot of words in here for you to locate. I'm asking you to grab a highlighter, and as you go through, just highlight words that kind of stand out to you. There's a couple already right here. It's kind of a shorter story, even though it looks longer when you look at the text. Do remember, though, that you have access to the video version. So it'll be interesting to take a look at this text and hear the language in it. Let's see how many different words you can find in here that jump out. Here's some really interesting ones. Some of it's just the language and how he spoke. Instead of saying Daniel, he kind of left off part of it. Daniel Repster, which is interesting because that's the name of the frog. Now here is the last page. Just so you know, it's kind of like a story within a story, which you should be able to pick up on when you are watching the Lego version, which is a lot of fun. So at this time, make sure that your group is taking a look at both texts and making sure that you're having some really good discussion about all the language that we've identified.